I guarantee you've heard her voice before, but you probably haven't met her. Her name is Susan Bennett, and she's the voice of Siri on the iPhone and iPad. So I want to welcome you, Susan. Thanks for taking the time today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So first question, I want to go back a little bit, sort of to the obvious question, which is, and we'll go beyond Siri too, because I know you have many talents beyond Siri, but how did you initially get the gig as Siri? Because, and what I find so interesting is that, to my knowledge, Apple didn't actually hire you. It was another company. So explain that, please.
Well, digital voices basically started recording for companies like what became Nuance, which is a text-to-speech company, you know, an IVR company, interactive voice systems. And when we first started the recordings, which happened, 10 years ago, which 10 years doesn't seem that long ago, but in technologically speaking, it's kind of like the dark ages. So we didn't really know what we were doing. It was kind of interesting recording all of these strange phrases and sentences that were going to be chopped up and used for phone systems. And we thought we were really just doing a kind of messaging. But as it turns out, there were some, Uber brains around that had other plans, and we and could envision something like what ended up being the first iPhone, which is, of course, not only a telephone, but a miniature computer that you hold in your hand and interact with. So that's how all that started. Apple came in after the fact. The Siri app was actually created by a Norwegian man named Dag Kitlaus. And I'm not sure whether he chose my voice when he first created the app and then Apple purchased it, or whether Apple did that after the fact. So I really don't know. It remains a mystery.
Well, yeah, definitely a mystery that people have a lot of interest for sure. I mean, millions of people use their iPhones and the Siri Assistant on a daily basis. Just a brief question here I do have to ask, because in the very limited voiceovers that I've done just for my own YouTube videos and stuff like that, reading scripts, etc., I do have to ask, when you were recording all those sentences and those weird phrases that made no sense, did you ever just sort of sit there for a minute and think to yourself, of course you were being paid, but still, were you just sitting there sort of thinking, what am I doing with my life? Was there ever any sort of moment like that for you?
Well, not really, because in a sense it was interesting work because it required a certain type of skill. It certainly wasn't what you would call creative or particularly interesting, but it was challenging in a way because every phrase and sentence had to be said in the very same way, the same pacing, the same pitch, and the same tone, the same expression. And so that was kind of challenging, especially because it required so much time, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for the month of July 2005. Those original recordings were what ended up becoming the basic vocabulary for the Siri app, and as well as subsequently some GPS systems and things like that. So it was a unique experience. It was interesting in a sense, but it was also very, very tedious. It's not for everyone. And yeah. I no longer do it, so I've had enough of it as well.
Yeah, I totally understand. Last question here on Siri. I've read some stories, done some research, of course, and Apple never actually told you before releasing the iPhone with Siri equipped on it that you were going to be the voice of Siri. So tell listeners how you actually found out that you were the voice, and what was your reaction to that?
Well, Siri first appeared on the iPhone 4S on October 4th, 2011, which doesn't seem real, but it's almost 4 years old already. But a fellow voice actor friend of mine emailed me and said, "Hey, we're playing around with this new iPhone. Isn't this you?" And I thought, oh. Well, I checked on the Apple site, and I listened, and I said, "That's me." So it was kind of a surprise, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, again, used on millions of devices, so definitely an influential person. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on and why I find you so interesting, because I just sort of have this fascination for whatever reason with people who are behind the scenes of very influential things. Another person that I've connected with has been Ben Patrick Johnson. He's a voiceover artist in Los Angeles. And another person I'm trying to interview as well, Carol Spinney. He's the puppeteer and voice of Big Bird. So it's just pretty cool to me. Now, moving on to your other voiceover work, what are some of the other clients that you've had and worked with?
Well, basically, I've been doing this for many years, decades, in fact. And so, consequently, I've worked for just about every major company. I can still be heard on all of the Delta Airlines gates worldwide. That's my voice that tells you what zone you're in. And let's see, I'm trying to think of where some other things are right now. My voice is in a lot of different places. I'm on GPS, on several GPS systems, and also I do a lot of messaging. So many times you'll call, a certain company, and my name will tell you where to go, basically.
Yeah, and I've heard that some people, after you came out, if you will, as Siri, that they've actually emailed you and apologized for cursing at their phone so many times. And
right. Yeah, and I tell them, don't worry, I can't really hear you.
Right. That's a definite upside. Now, going back to more of your voiceover career, a lot of people might think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but again, with my very limited experience, I find that being, again, I'm not a paid voiceover artist or anything, but just recording some stuff, people might think it's a lot more glamorous than it actually is. Other than being able to work in your pajamas and I assume having flexible hours, what's the average day of a voiceover artist? What's your day like?
Well, each day is different, and that's one of the big pluses. On the other side of the coin, you don't ever really know where all of your work is going to come from, so you have to be a little bit flexible. You have to be a little careful with the income that you make. Mm-hmm. But as I say, it changes day to day because there are so many different aspects to the voiceover business. Now, there are most people, when they think of voiceover, they think, oh, I want to be a cartoon, I'm going to do all these different voices, and that's really great, but mostly animation voices are almost all in Los Angeles, and of course, as everyone knows, a lot of those voices are celebrity, people too, that do those types of jobs. On a more just a down-to-earth aspect of voice work, there are a lot of narrations, there's e-learning, there are audiobooks, radio and television commercials. So each day can be very different, and that's one of the really fun things about it. It's one of the things that I really appreciate. And but some of the things that you said, being able to work in your jammies, that's a big plus. But a lot of it too that's really nice is to have a bit of flexibility and have quite a bit of free time as well. So.
Now, when you're talking about this concentration of voiceover actors in LA, that's a perfect segue into my next question, because I was wondering earlier, you were talking about the dark ages just a decade ago, insofar as technology, but how have you seen, because again, you said you've been in the business for 30 years, if I'm not mistaken, or even beyond that, but how have you seen the voiceover industry really change, if there has been a shift, which I assume there is, from, these dark ages to what it is now with the internet? Is there a lot more competition? Is it easier? What's that like?
It has been not a change. It has been a revolution. Basically, in the past, the way voiceover was done, and of course in the past, voiceover, if you told someone that you were a voice artist, they'd say, what's that? And no one had any idea. Now, everyone and his brother wants to be a voice talent, and basically, with the recording equipment as cheap as it is now, you basically can be if you have the skills. But in the past, the person in charge, the producer, director, whomever, would contact your agent and say, give me your top 5 or 10 people in this particular category, say, women aged 35 to 45. And then you would, you would do your audition, and you would only be competing against a few people. Plus, the producer would have a relationship with your agent, and, the agent could put in a few good words for you and say, well, she does a really great job, she's always on time, blah, blah, blah. Now that all of that system is pretty much broken down, because really of technology, and because so many different production companies have popped up on the web, and because so many people are interested in getting into the business, at this point in time, everything is done through an audition, and one never knows where all those auditions are going. If I see an audition that comes to me through via my email, I know that it's going to my particular agent, but I don't know how many other agents it's going to, and thus I don't know how many people I'm competing against. And sometimes it can be hundreds of people. And so consequently, that has really changed. And I don't know that it's necessarily for the better. I guess there are more opportunities for people, but it's like anything else that involves the web, and that is that somehow you have to really, really distinguish yourself to jump out of the mix.
Yeah, and it's certainly an adaptation that you have to go through. As with we've seen many businesses doing that now. I want to go back to Siri just for one quick question.
Sure.
I was listening to one interview you did. I don't know if I think it was just a text-based interview, or it might have been a video interview, but nonetheless, tell listeners the story from Halloween when one of the neighborhood kids came to you and heard that you were Siri. What was that story?
Oh, that was pretty funny. I used this story to illustrate the fact that my regular speaking voice doesn't sound all that much like Siri. So for the most part, people don't recognize me as being the original voice of Siri. Siri's voice is pitched a little bit lower. Hello. Hello. And also she doesn't quite yet have the fluidity that regular humans have. She still has a few little, robotic sounds to her. So one little boy at Halloween came to the house and he said, gee, all the neighbors say you're Siri. And I said, well, yes, I am. And he said, well, you don't sound like Siri. And I said, how about now?
I just love that story.
His jaw dropped and he grabbed his candy and left.
I absolutely love that. One of my last questions here, I know I'll let you go just in a couple minutes. I wanted to get, aside from voiceovers and everything, what are your general tips or attributes that you find in your character that have made you the successful person you are today, Susan?
Well, I think that I really love what I do, and I always try to do the best I possibly can. I did take voice coaching. I still take voice coaching. I had a voice coach last year for several months. And so you can never stop learning. And much of voice work has to do with trends that are happening, in commercials or different things like that. And so, it really behooves you to keep up with what's going on and to keep practicing. For someone who is a novice in voiceover, you really have to be able to read. You need to be able to read cold, and pick up a magazine and start reading it and have it make sense. There's a little bit more to it than some people assume, I think. It's more than having a really great voice. That's a good place to start. But you really have to be an actor, and that's why most voice people do come from the acting side or music side. A lot of musicians become voiceover people, and also audio engineers. And I think that has a lot to do with being able to hear well and duplicate or replicate sound.
Certainly, I know you came from a musical background, and we don't have time to go into that, unfortunately, but I know that's a big part of your life. My last question here, I listened on your website to a couple different demos you had, and I was really shocked and impressed by the amount of range you have insofar as, you know, the ages you can do. You can make yourself sound like a teenage girl, and then you can also sound like an older person as well. So I know it's sort of a random question almost, but have you ever, or a very niche question, but have you ever sort of used that to your advantage? One example I thought of in my head is if, you know, someone's calling for a bill you need to pay, and you say, you know, oh, let me go get my mom, and then you just hang up or something. Have you ever used that to your advantage?
No, I never really have done that in real life. I save my voices for for fun with friends and things like that. And but I do love to do different types of voices. Right now, at this particular time, you know, as we talked about trends, there's not as much of that in commercials now. At least the things that I get are mostly just, you know, announcer type people. So, but but that's a good idea. Instead of you know, not answering that phone call, I should answer it in a silly voice.
Yeah, I mean, you got to use what you have to your advantage, use your talents, and obviously that's what you're doing, Susan Bennett, the voice of Siri. I want to thank you again for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed talking with you, Andrew.
All right, thanks again. Bye, Susan.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.